98FM's Dublin Talks with Adrian Kennedy. Weekdays from 10 a.m. on 98FM.
I'm joined on the line by a Dublin mother by the name of Karen, who has bravely spoken out about the trauma of living with suicide in her family. You're very welcome along to 98FM's Dublin Talks, Karen.
Thank you, Jeremy.
First of all, I want to say, and I don't mean this in any way patronising, I think you're very brave for speaking out about this because it's a very personal issue. It's something that's happened in your family. I have several friends and family members who are in the same position as you but wouldn't speak out in public about it, and that's obviously their right, but I think it's important that people do hear your story. Because you, Karen, lost not one but two sons to suicide. Is that right?
I did, Jeremy. In the last 2 years, I've lost my son Stephen in June 2015 and my youngest son Graham in November of last year. They both took very different paths in life, but they both ultimately ended their lives the same way. Now,
as I said at the start there, I know people who have lost family members from suicide, and losing one family member is just unthinkable. It's unbearable. It's tragic. But you lost two sons within the space of 3 years. Now, before we talk about the circumstances around that, I just want to ask you on a personal note, how do you cope every day? How do you get up in the morning? How do you carry on?
Well, I have to carry on, Jeremy, because I have a beautiful daughter and a granddaughter. And trust me, it's hard. There's some days I have very bad days. And I will be honest, I've had suicidal thoughts myself, but I could never do that to my family again. We've suffered enough, and my daughter and my granddaughter deserve better.
Your son, Stephen, age 30. Tell me about him.
Stephen started smoking weed when he was in secondary school when he was 15, and it progressed that by the time he was 17, he was a fully blown heroin addict. Stephen was always a follower, never a leader, and he always went where the crack was. But unfortunately, becoming a heroin addict wasn't too much crack, to be honest with you. And it had a devastating effect on my family. My daughter was 10 going on 11 at the time. Graham was 4 going on 5. And they both lost their brother a long time ago to addiction. And as the years went on, his addiction became chronic. He was homeless on many an occasion, but he worked for many years and he tried to hide his addiction. And 4 years before his death, he had gone in and out of treatment. He'd done very well, but on every occasion when we had hope, he always relapsed again. And
I believe you did everything in your power. You fought to try and get him the support and help that he needed.
Absolutely. Myself and my daughter fought. We got him into treatment centres. We brought him to counselling. But the truth is, when somebody is in active addiction, they only will help themselves when they're ready to help themselves. And it was many times that Stephen hadn't reached the bottom. But 6 months before he died, I just literally couldn't take any more. I found out that Christmas that he was using again. And the fight was literally gone out of me, and we had a row just after Christmas, and I told him, Stephen, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. It's literally killing me, watching you killing yourself. And after that, we didn't speak. My daughter Rachel took on the role of his support that I tried to give him through all the years. And on the June bank holiday weekend in 2015, I had this terrible feeling that there was something wrong with Stephen. I just couldn't shake it. And on the Monday night, I rang my ex-husband and I said to him, David, I think there's something seriously wrong with Stephen. And he said to me, no, he's fine. Rachel was speaking to him on Friday. He's good. And about an hour later, David rang me back and he said, Karen, Stephen is dead.
Just like
and
that.
I can tell you it was at 8 minutes past 10 on the bank holiday Monday night, because I'll always remember that time.
And that's one thing that struck me when I was talking to you off air before the show started, is that you obviously know the exact times, the exact dates when both of these incidents happened. That must have hit you like that. That is the news that no parent wants to hear, and it must have hit you like a ton of bricks when you got that phone call.
Absolutely, and I mean, when one person dies of suicide, of course it affects their family, but the knock-on effect it affects so many people, and I don't think there's one person in this country that doesn't know somebody that has died by suicide.
Were you surprised when you got the call?
I suppose always in the back of our minds, Jeremy, we thought that maybe he might overdose. Because when you have somebody with an addict in the family, I used to get up every day and the first thing I do is look at the news to see if somebody had died. It's on your mind constantly.
Of course, yeah.
But Stephen had he thought of suicide out, and I learned from his friends afterwards that he had made an attempt a couple of weeks beforehand. But he did sit down and he wrote letters to ourselves and to his girlfriend, and he addressed the letter to Rachel and family because he said in the letter that he felt that Rachel was the only person that he had left in the world.
And did you see the letter? Did you get to see the letter?
Yes, I did. Yeah, the guards gave it was the next day.
No, you don't have to tell us what the contents of the letter are if you don't want to.
Well, basically what he said, that he was so sorry for what he'd done, and he's so sorry for all the hassle that he caused us over the years, and that he genuinely felt that it was the best thing for him to take his own life. He said that he got involved with people that were never going to make anything good happen in his life, and that he just felt he couldn't see a future for himself and he couldn't go on.
What was it like reading that letter?
Oh my God, it was devastating, absolutely devastating. And the thing about it is, in the aftermath of suicide, everybody blames themselves, the amount of guilt, the questions, what if I'd done this? If I'd spoken to him in the 6 months, maybe I could have helped him. It's an absolute mental torture that you put yourself through afterwards.
And I believe after he died, you found different journals with stuff written on it.
Stephen had hung himself in his apartment, and I had to clear out his apartment the week after his death. And in the top of his wardrobe, I found this plastic bag with all these beautifully written journals that he'd written when he was in recovery. And they were just so honest, and like when somebody's in addiction, they'll lie, to get everything that they want. And all the things that I said had happened over the years, and he denied. He'd written about it all in the journals, and he'd written about his mental struggles and confidence, and how much the drugs had affected his body and his mental health.
So you're dealing with this whole trauma in your life, and fast forward 2 years on, 2 and a bit.
Well, the week before Stephen died, Graham had a row with him, and it ended up that Graham put Stephen out of the house and he changed the locks. So when Stephen died, Graham felt that it was his fault, because that's what happens in family. Everybody blames themselves. There's
a huge guilt factor.
Yeah.
Now, in a way, just getting back to the letter, I think sometimes when it comes to suicide, I think sometimes it is better if there is a note or a letter left, because sometimes the notes and letters, they answer some questions that people may not have. I've had friends who've had family members that took their own life, and there wasn't a clue that it was going. There was no warning signs. There was no letter, and that leaves you with so many more questions to ask, whereas at least you had the letter there and then you had the journals.
Yes.
But then talk to us about Graham, your other son.
When Stephen died, Graham and myself went to console for counselling. I continued going, but Graham had to leave after 3 sessions because he couldn't face talking about Stephen's death. And his way of dealing with it was to throw himself into college. He was a huge achiever. He was highly intelligent. One of his tutors told me that he was actually a genius. He was a software developer. And his tutor told me that he knew of only one other programmer in the world who was more intelligent than Graham. So Graham got the highest degree in the 30 years history of NCI College. He got a job with Workday, an American company here in Dublin, as a software developer.
He had everything going for him, didn't he?
He had everything. His passion in life was motorbikes. He had his 3 motorbikes. He had a huge circle of friends. He was a member of Biker Rivera. He still was with all his school friends.
So a complete contrast to your other son. Graham literally had life in his hands. He had a great job. He
had a fantastic life. He had the world at his feet, and we were all so delighted to be following how well he was doing, and we used to love listening to his stories. And in the end of October, his company sent him out to San Francisco to work for 2 weeks, and he had an absolute ball. He came back. It was his 22nd birthday on the 18th of November, the Saturday. And on the Friday and the Saturday night, he had his friends in Swords on the Saturday night, and then he went to a party in Lucan. His friends in Swords on the Friday. He went to a party on the Saturday night here in Lucan, and then I collected him on the Sunday morning. And when he came home, he seemed to be a bit agitated. My family came out for dinner for his birthday, and that night he just couldn't sit easy. And I said to him, Graham, what is going on with you?
And had he been diagnosed with anxiety?
Not in the least at all.
Okay, so there was no warning signs there at all. Okay,
nothing at all. And he did say to me, Mum, I was smoking weed Friday and Saturday night. I lost the head with him because he knew exactly how much I deplored drugs.
Of course, yeah.
And then I felt bad after I'd given out to him, and I went in and I got into bed with him. And we stayed there for nearly 2 hours, and we chatted away about everything under the sun. And he said to me, Mum, you're the only one that can calm me down. So I said to him, Graham, try and get some sleep. So the next morning he got up. He was going to work from my house for the day, but he realised he'd left his laptop in Swords. So he said he'd go home to Swords and work from home for the day. I went to one of my oldest friends' funeral, and I wasn't well, so I went to the doctor on the way home. And he rang me at lunchtime and he said to me, Mum, I don't know what's wrong with me. He said, I feel terrible and I feel so anxious.
Okay.
And I said to him, Graham, just eat something, drink loads of water to get all that crap out of your system. And I said, I'll ring you back in a half an hour. But I actually fell asleep. Yeah.
Now the next part of your story I found just very difficult to comprehend. Because you fell asleep for half an hour, then you woke up and you looked at your phone.
I woke up at 2:45, and between 2:15 and 2:45 there was 2 missed calls on my phone from him. And if I missed a call or vice versa, we always rang each other back.
Yeah.
I rang him back about 10 times and there was no answer, and I just knew in my heart and my soul that he was dead.
Really?
I knew.
Even though there were, and that's the problem with suicide, isn't it? That a lot of the time there's no warning signs. So you woke up after being asleep. You saw 2 missed calls from him. You tried ringing him back about 10 times, no answer, and you knew. Mothers always know, don't they?
Well, they say that the invisible cord is never cut, Jeremy.
No,
I knew when the 2 of them were gone. So I jumped into the car and I drove across the M50 and I got the key to the house from my daughter, and I'd phoned him maybe 30, 40 times on the way over. Of course,
ringing him non-stop, yeah.
Rachel wanted to come with me, but I didn't want her to come. I wouldn't let her. And I got out to the house, and there was just this tiny little bit of hope that maybe he was asleep.
Yeah.
And I ran upstairs, and he wasn't there. And I went back down to the kitchen, and the back door was unlocked. And he had this big bike shed that he kept all his bikes in. And I knew. I walked out, and I found him hanging between 2 of his motorbikes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that is an image that will never, and I'm sure it's an image that haunts you every time you close your eyes.
I've had terrible flashbacks.
Yeah.
Panic attacks as a result. But the only thing that I will say is that he looked beautiful and he looked peaceful.
Oh, it's terrible. It must have, I mean, you were still dealing, and the trauma of the death of your first son was never going to go away.
No.
And you're struggling with that at the moment. And then just when you think things are getting a bit better, this happens. And the fact that
we were looking forward to Christmas that year because Rachel had a beautiful little girl, Lila. She was 1, and I felt like putting up a Christmas tree that year. And of course, things were
starting to,
yeah. But the thing about it is, Graham didn't leave any letters because I truly believe that it was an impulse action, that the weed played a large part in it because, it given him anxiety and he couldn't cope with it. But it definitely wasn't thought out. It was an impulse.
And that's the difference between the two. That's why your story is so different, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. How 2 suicides within the same family, both your sons, who had different paths in lives in their life, and just completely different set of circumstances. And I suppose because he didn't leave a letter, that left you with so many questions that you wanted to ask that were never answered.
We'll never get the answers, Jeremy. And on the day, the 23rd of November, he should have had his graduation at 10 o'clock, and that was the day that we had his funeral. And he was looking forward to his graduation. He'd been out on the Saturday, to get a suit, and he was a terrible shopper. So Rachel's partner, Philly, said he'd give him a suit, and he was happy with that, and we'd all the arrangements made for Thursday to meet for his graduation. And I buried him in his graduation suit.
Oh, my God. Wasn't the way it was meant to be, really, was it?
No, it wasn't.
And the thing about this story was he knew the heartache that it had caused to the family when your first son took his own life.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew it more than anybody else. He was going through it as well. What do you attribute it to? I mean, obviously there were signs of anxiety there. It was undiagnosed, but it was pretty obvious that he had anxiety.
Well, I mean, they say parents are the last people to know. I genuinely did not see any depression in Graham. If you saw his Facebook page, it was all videos of him on his nights out, and he was always up in the front having the crack. And, you know, he, like, from the outside looking in, he had a fantastic life and he had everything ahead of him. But obviously, we didn't see the signs.
No, isn't that the whole thing? You never do. There was a story in the news about a year ago. I can't even remember what it was. It was some famous guy in America who had taken his own life, and 2 days before he took his own life, a photograph appeared online, and he was standing on a pier with his children. And in the photograph, this fella looked as happy as Larry. He was grinning from ear to ear, and 48 hours after the photograph was taken, he had taken his own life. That's the problem, isn't it? There's no...
Well, that's it. That was Graham. He was always the life and soul of the party. He always put himself out there, you know. But as I said, we didn't see the signs, and we'll never know. We never have the answers.
And I know it's difficult for you not to feel any guilt, but you shouldn't feel. And I know it's a natural thing to feel. But you know, you couldn't have done any more than you did.
If I'm to spend my life riddled with guilt, well, then I wouldn't be here, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is why I'm doing this, because firstly, there's no support out there from the government for families bereaved by suicide.
Yeah, and by the way, there's more people killed by suicide than there are on the roads. Yet
absolutely.
You often hear about safety campaigns for traffic and on the roads, which we should have, but you don't hear as much about suicide.
Well, I mean, it's definitely an epidemic. There's no doubt about that. And also, the amount of family members that follow through and have successful suicides, it seems that the government don't want to face up to this. I know so many people myself. I've been told of another person this morning who took his own life, and his father died 3 years ago. We have friends out in River Valley that are in the same position. I had to wait nearly 7 months to get an appointment with Pieta House for counselling. Now, don't get me wrong, they're fantastic. But families bereaved by suicide, it's a completely different bereavement. They need counselling and they need support from the first day.
And are you getting counselling at the moment?
I'm going to Pieta House myself.
Good. Yeah. Okay, because I mean, you have suffered more grief in your lifetime than anybody else I know. I have to be honest with you. And you know, added to that, the trauma of you finding your son. I mean, that image that you've just given to me, I have that in my mind now. You walking into the garage there. It just, I mean, it must haunt you. And I have to say, and again, I don't mean this in a patronising way, you were so brave for talking about this and giving this talk tonight in River Valley. What would you like to say to people? I've no doubt there are people who are listening at the moment who, and I'm not talking about people for a moment, I'm not talking about people with depression who are feeling suicidal. I'm talking about family members of these people. What would your advice be to family members who are dealing with this at the moment?
I would urge them to go out and get support. That they, you know, we need to get rid of the stigma of suicide in Ireland, and we need to talk about it, because it's only by talking about it that we're going to prevent it. I'd love to see mindfulness classes coming into the schools from children so that they're caught at an early age and they know that it's okay to talk. I'd love to see children being kinder to each other, because there's so many pressures out there for the kids nowadays. Paul is going to talk tonight on cyberbullying, which is a huge, big issue.
Absolutely.
You know, and the effect of the internet on the children. There's homelessness, marriage breakdowns, things that weren't there 20 years ago. Anxiety is the big word now because of the pressures that the children are under.
Can I read out a few messages for you of support?
Sure, yeah.
Karen, that woman is so brave, and what she's going through. Fair play to her for speaking out. That woman is so strong and brave, coming from a man who attempted to take my own life, but gladly I'm here today to listen to your show. Fair play for holding it together. That woman is an inspiration. I'm delighted that woman has spoken out about her son. Fair play to her. I don't know where she gets the strength, but she is a very strong woman, and she should be very proud of herself. That's just some of the many messages that are coming in.
Thank you.
Once again, give me the details of that talk tonight.
It's in the River Valley in Rathingle Community Centre in Swords at 7:30. Paul O'Connor from Jumpy Mean behind your screen will be speaking about cyberbullying and the effect of the internet on children. Elaine Hughes, who's the mother of Darren Hughes, and Darren took his own life when he was 17 as a result of cyberbullying. And ironically, Graham and Darren were friends when they were younger. I'll speak about my story as well, and Brian McMeany, who's an addiction counsellor, will speak about addiction and peer pressure.
Okay, so it's covering all angles really.
Yeah.
In the suicide issue. I thought pleasure is the wrong word, I suppose, to use because it obviously wasn't a pleasurable conversation, but it was an honour to speak to you, Karen, and to hear you speaking so openly about something that's so personal. I don't know where you find the strength. I'm glad you do find the strength. I don't know where you find it. You're a very, very strong woman, and I wish you the best for the future, and I'm sure we'll talk again. And the best of luck with the talk tonight.
Thanks a million, Jeremy. I appreciate that.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much,
Bye.
Karen. That's tough, isn't it? I mean, what do you say to a woman who has been through so much hurt and anguish? That is Dublin mother Karen Doherty lost two sons, 30-year-old son Stephen and 22-year-old Graham, who took their lives within 3 years of each other. Just think about that for a moment. Losing one son, trying to get your life back together. 3 years later, you find your second son. And you're the one that finds him in his garage. No note left. I want to give out a number for the Samaritans because I'm aware, anytime we talk about issues like this, I'm aware that there are people who are listening who are feeling suicidal, and you need to know that there is help there for you. The number for the Samaritans is 116 123. 116 123. If you're affected by anything relating to what we've just been talking about on the show there, please ring that number. Or if you can this evening, pop down to River Valley in Swords. Let me give you the details of it again, because you know what they say, it's good to talk. It really is good to talk. Karen will be there herself along with other people affected by suicide. It's taking place in the River Valley Community Centre in Swords at 7:30 this evening. And I would urge you that if you're affected by anything that we've spoken about there, to try and pop along there and talk to those people. It's 98FM's Dublin Talks.
98FM's Dublin Talks with Adrian Kennedy. Weekdays from 10 a.m. on 98FM.